So how much should you have saved for retirement by age? That's what we're gonna talk about right now. All right, so you're probably looking forward to retirement. You're wondering, what should you do? How much should I be saving, especially if I wanna hit my certain goals by a certain age? Is it the age of 65? Is it the age of 55? Is it the age of 95? Whatever the age is, hopefully not that late. You wanna be able to know how much you should be saving right now. That's what I'm gonna dig into today to help you figure out how to best calculate that number for you. All right, so how much should we actually save for retirement? Now depending on the age you are now versus the age you're trying to get to, it really just depends. And it also depends on a lot of variable factors, right? When I used to be a traditional financial advisor, it was so easy. I could just put numbers in a calculator and I would just show you like, hey, if you make 12% returns for the next 40 years, you could save $100 a month and still be a millionaire, or pretty close to it at least, right? And so I'd show people that. But the reality is that really true? Are you really getting those numbers or not? And so I really want to dig into this to really create a more realistic picture. And just so you know, it could actually depress you a little bit. However, the good news is this, depending on how much you're trying to save or how much you want to live on, right? The question is this, can we do it better? And the answer is absolutely 100% yes. But it's going to require you to do something a little bit different than what most people do, which is why so many people don't hit retirement when they want to. All right, so the first thing we have to figure out is how much time do you have, right? Because even though we say, you're trying to hit a certain age, of how much you do have in your 20s, your 30s, or your 40s, or 50s, or whatever it might be, the truth is it really just depends on what your end goal is. So the whole shoulda, woulda, coulda thing I think is just kind of ridiculous, right? Because people say, well, how much should I have saved? Well, are you trying to live a 50,000 year lifestyle or a 500,000 year lifestyle? That's gonna vary. Right? And everybody has different circumstances. Everybody has different ways they want to live. You could be single, you could be married, you might have really this generational squeeze in your home where you might still have adult kids living with you, and maybe you're taking care of aging parents and things like that. It's really hard to plan, isn't it? It's really hard to figure out how much you really need to have by what age, because we don't know our future. And so a lot of times when I'm speaking with clients now, it's really more about, well, I want as much as I can get as quick as I can get it, right? But let's just talk about what you should have saved if you're going for a certain goal. So let's just say, for example, that you're just starting out and you want to have a $60,000 a year lifestyle, or $5,000 a month. That's in today's dollars, not of tomorrow's. I know that $5,000 a month is not a lot. For some, it's more, especially if you're single, it's a little bit better versus those that are married or maybe want to have a different kind of lifestyle. But I go with this base level just to make it easy. Now, if you're trying to start today, say you have 40 years till your retirement goal, right? So let's just assume that age 65 is your retirement goal. If you want to have a $60,000 a year lifestyle, you got to prepare right now. And here's why. Because there's a few variables we got to look at. One is, how much do you need to save? Well, that depends on how much you're earning with the money you're investing, isn't it? And that's a whole nother situation too. And this is not even factoring in inflation. So if we start to factor in inflation, there's a different aspect. So I ran some different assumptions here, right? Because here's the ultimate goal. If you're trying to retire with $60,000 a year today, and if you're just going to do it in mutual funds or 401ks and IRAs and things like that, if that's your goal, then you need to have about 33 times, or at least 30 times of whatever you're trying to earn per year. So if it's $5,000 a month, that's $60,000 a year. You need at least 30 times that. That's a 3. There you go. 30 times that. And as a result, guess what? You have $1.8 million. Because if you lived on 3% of $1.8 million, you're going to come up with just under $60,000 a year. Now, if it's 3.33, yeah, all that stuff. I get it. So if you're trying to live on about 3 1/3%, you need 1.8 million. Really, if you want to be conservative, you might want to say, well, if I want to live on 3%, I need $2 million to live on $60,000 a year, because 3% of $2 million is $60,000 a year. That's just today's dollars, right? There's 3 variables are this: how much you save, what the inflation rate is, and how much you're earning on your money. Let me start with, first and foremost, is the assumptions on what you're earning on your money. Now, if you're in typical mutual funds, right, this is tricky, because you're always taught that it's 10 or 12% a year. But in truth, it has not been that much long term. Even the last 30-year average of the S&P 500 has been roughly about 8.5%, a little bit less than 8.5%. That's if you're investing in the S&P 500. What most people don't realize, if you're saving money in a 401k, most 401ks don't even make 8.5%. Usually you make a few percent less in those target date funds like what Fidelity came out with. For example, when I ran the numbers for the last 10 years, Fidelity's target date retirement funds underperformed by about 2% a year. Now you might say, well, I'm getting the match, Chris. Well, that's true, but in a 40-year time period, that match really only adds about 2% a year, which just means you make it back. So let's just assume you make 8%. Most people don't in their 401ks, but let's just assume that you do, even with the match and everything else. If you make 8% a year, and let's assume that inflation's 5% a year. Now many people will say, hold on, Chris, I was told inflation is more like 3% a year. That's what they all tell you. The government loves to manipulate the numbers, but you know in real life, 3% a year means that your lifestyle only has to double about once every 24 years. Come on, let's be honest here. It's probably closer to about every 10 to 15 years that we have that case. Now, I went conservative. I went by 5%. I know shadowstats.com, you go to shadowstats.com, they'll actually show you how the inflation rate's closer to about 7 to 9%. I brought it down to 5 because I didn't want to depress you too much, okay? So 8% return, 5% inflation. What does that mean? It means right now, if you want to save up about that 60,000 a year lifestyle, you got to save about 45,000 a year, really almost about 50,000 a year. So think about this. To live on 60,000 a year, you got to save about 50,000 a year right now. That's insane. Right? That's completely insane. Now, I know there's going to be some financial advisor that may say, well, it's not that, and dividends reinvested, you actually earned this. Well, I've been in this business for now going on about 23 years. And I will tell you that everything I promised as a financial advisor 20 years ago has not come to pass. Even though we've had a great run for the last 15 years, and really an overrun, because the market's way overvalued for the last 15 years, still, people's numbers aren't as good as what we were predicting back then. Not just because of bad mutual funds and things like that. No, it's because we overestimated on the actual performance of the market. Okay, so think about this. That's a pretty discouraging thing. Now, if I raised it to 9%, right? Now, I'm actually running numbers right here at the same time. That's why I'm kind of looking down at this. All right, so if you want to be able to do this now, starting from zero, you got to save 40,000 a year starting today till you have that 60,000 a year lifestyle. That's if you're in your 20s. Now, what if you're in your 30s? You want that 60,000 a year lifestyle. That means you got to have about $400,000 saved up by that point, then also saving 40,000 a year. What if you're trying to do this from your 40s? You got 20 years left. If you want to still have that 60,000 a year lifestyle, you got to now have about $700,000 saved up, and that still keep adding 40,000 a year. Now, if you got more than this, good news, you don't have to save as much, right? But if again, we're just saying that 40,000 a year forever, this is where you got to be. Now, if you got 10 years, you got to be roughly about 1.2 million at this point if you're in your 50s trying to retire by your 60s at a 60,000 a year lifestyle. The sad thing is most people in their 50s have roughly about 300,000 or so in their retirement accounts, not even anywhere close to that, which is why so many people need Social Security. Now you kind of see what this is looking like, right? You might think it's better or worse. Now, if your goal is not 60,000 a year, but 120,000 a year or 10,000 a month, you need double these numbers I just said by those ages. So it might seem like this is amazingly uphill battle. And this is exactly what I witnessed firsthand when I was a financial advisor, sitting down with my dad, who at that point was in his 60s. And of course, I said, Dad, even though you've got hundreds of thousands of dollars saved up, you're debt-free, still you couldn't live on that 50,000 or 60,000 a year that you want to live on in retirement because you don't have enough money to live on. You'll run out of money because you should not be pulling out more than 3% a year in retirement. They sometimes will say 4%, but that's just not true. You don't want to be doing that. So instead I said, Dad, I don't know what the option is for you. Keep working longer, which is why even the CEO of BlackRock had said recently, he says, listen, people should be working into their 70s if they want to have a good retirement, especially because if you make it to age 65 as a couple, one of the two of you are likely to make it to age 90 or 92. So you've got to have all this money saved up to last longer in retirement, which is why pulling out the whole 4% thing was old, antiquated stuff when people died younger, right? And inflation was lower because we were still on the gold standard back then. We're not anymore. Inflation's higher and people are living longer. Therefore, 3% rule is better. Now, here's another thing. If you're in your 20s, maybe you want an early retirement, guess what? Your 20s or 30s, or even sometimes your 40s, you shouldn't be pulling out 3%. It should be more like 2% a year if you're doing mutual funds. That means if you have $1 million, you should not be pulling out more than $20,000 a year. I know that's not exciting because, well, it's just not, right? If you don't want your money to run out faster, or sooner because of inflation and everything else, you've got to be careful. Now, what's the other option? This is what I found out later because I couldn't help my dad retire. I said, what else could there be out there? What else could we be doing? Well, I realized it wasn't about accumulating and this big nest egg of money. The accumulation theory is the old one that financial advisors have always taught you, and yet is so hard to really achieve any kind of decent financial lifestyle or freedom possible for you. It's just not reality. And so instead, you got to focus more on cash flow, income coming from that money. How do we get that money to produce real income? Well, here's the thing, guys. If you want to be able to do it easier and faster, focus on cash flow or passive income, like I talk about a lot on this channel. Plenty of videos on that here, of course. But the biggest thing is this, is that I realized with my dad, let's just say he had $300,000 at the time, which was about true. See, he could only live on $9,000 a year if he wanted to let that money last. Now, if he worked longer, sure, maybe we could pull a higher percentage. But that's the thing, he had to work into his 70s because of it. But that $300,000 a year, I've got other clients that had the same thing, and they could do much better with that. For example, I had one client that actually had $250,000 sitting in his mutual funds, in his stock investments and everything else. And so we said, well, let's take that money instead, buy real estate with it. And so he bought several rentals with that. And then he's been taking that money and reinvesting it, just like you would if you, of course, have it in mutual funds, you let it compound the interest, right? But instead of compounding interest, you compound income. And so he's been doing that over the last 5 years. And guys, although the results may vary, there are no guarantees, of course, right? But despite all that, guess what? He's now got several rental properties. He's got like 7 or 8 rental properties right now, cash flowing him $3,500 a month, and they're now worth $250,000. And this is just after 5 years. Again, it doesn't guarantee the next 5 years are going to look like that for everybody who has $250,000 they invest in real estate. Results do vary. It does very much depend on where you're investing, how you're investing. Appreciation helps, of course, and things like that, just like it helped the stock market too. So unlike the stock market, which can go down, usually real estate will not go down at the same time. They'll usually at least stay the same, if not go up during recessions. And so he's able to safeguard his money and generate income from it. Remember, $250,000 pulling out 3% a year would only be $7,500 a year. But because he's got that in actual income producing assets, like real estate backed investments, that money's kicking off better returns. We have other people that will just go and lend the money. They don't have to buy a property. They go and lend that money. That $250,000 would make you $25,000 a year if you earn 10%. Much, much better. And so if, as a result, if you want that same $50,000 a year lifestyle, even today, if you've got at least $500,000 right now, if that makes even just 10%, you're making $50,000 a year right now. That is what got me to leave the financial advising industry. I realized, wait a minute, there's so much more potential because it's not about accumulating all this money and living on less than the interest, which is what I've always been taught as a financial advisor, and we've been taught to teach you too, right? But instead, we're actually able to take this money, earn real income with a real asset, and not have to spend the principal. The money's still there inside that asset, but it's generating a much higher income source for you. Or if you like this video and you're ready to take it to another level, a little deeper understanding here, check out this next video here that'll kind of help give you a better understanding of this.